All right, I had a little musical interlude for you this morning. If we were taking this face to face, I play music before the start of every class, so I thought I'd do that at least once in our online experience this semester. We're going to be doing nuclear war, not on the dance floor, but across the planet. So 1950s is our decade for the most part. We're continuing in the Cold War struggle. We're going to bring in civil rights, and we're also going to build an interstate. So it's kind of this crazy thing. We've got some radical extremes, and then we've got this big fat middle of America that we're also going to be talking about. 1952, Dwight David Eisenhower runs for president with the catchy slogan of "I like Ike." I'm going to put up a link to to a website called the Living Room Candidate, which is a collection of every television presidential ad that's ever been aired. And in it, you can see the Eisenhower ad from 1952. It's pretty funny. It's pretty silly. And gives you an idea of sort of, I don't know, the naivete of the country, maybe a little bit. And yet we also have other elements in the background. So it's not always this sort of Leave It to Beaver 1950s. There's some darker undercurrents. 1952, Republican Eisenhower. Now remember, it had been Democrats since 1932. So this is a huge turn of events. The Republicans carry almost the entire country except for the solid South that had voted Democratic since the end of the Civil War. So keep that in mind. That's going to change very quickly as a result of the Civil Rights Movement. Eisenhower, I've said all this sort of stuff. Oh yeah, he's the leader of the Allied forces during World War II. He's not the Republican of today, though. He expands government quite a bit. He expands it partially because of the Cold War. So the Soviets launched Sputnik, a little basketball-sized satellite in 1957. Freaks America out. We respond with the National Defense Act. We respond with NASA. We respond, in some ways, the Interstate Highway Act is a Cold War thing. It has to do with getting out of the cities, but it's also modeled a little bit on the German interstate system, as you guys know. Anyway, so the big thing under Eisenhower is we get a big federal government, but it's this military establishment. Ike's new look, in other words, he changes defensive strategy, and he says we're going to rely on nuclear weapons, not on huge conventional forces, because it's supposed to be cheaper that way. John Foster Dulles, he's a creepy dude. He does lots of things while he's in power. Remember, Truman had containment. Dulles says, let's roll it back. Anywhere we can meet communism and roll it back on itself, in other words, fight actively against it, we will. His rhetoric fell short in Hungary, but in a whole bunch of other places we do intervene. And by the way, Vietnam becomes a big problem, right? Iran, we're still dealing with the fallout from the intervention of Dulles in Iran. And Egypt is a really complicated story we're not going to get into, but our influence in Egypt is still being felt as well. All right, so the Shah of Iran, let's focus here for a little bit. After World War II, there is a new government put in place in Iran, and there is a democratically elected leader, Mossadegh. He does a few things that make John Foster Dulles uneasy, and so the CIA backs a coup, and they put the Shah on the throne. So this guy is the Shah. This guy is not Mossadegh. The Shah becomes a modernizer. The Shah becomes a westernizer. And underneath that current is a Islamic, because previous to this, Iran had been an Islamic state, an Islamic undercurrent that eventually rises up in 1979 with the Iranian Revolution. So just keep that in the background. The CIA does some dirty business, helps back a coup that overthrows a leader and puts a dictator on the throne, all in the defense of fighting communism, right? But it's kind of, well, untoward. The other way that we fight the Cold War is through mutually assured destruction, keeping the peace by blowing up the planet, or at least by the threat of blowing up the planet. Strategic Air Command is the air wing of this. It is a creation of the Cold War. It lasts until the end of the Cold War. It's kind of a fascinating little deal. Courtesy LeMay, the leader behind Strategic Air Command. He's the visionary, and what he wanted was the ability to launch 80% of our atomic stockpile in one mission, right? You can't have mutually assured destruction if you can't destroy it. So he oversees a massive buildup of our nuclear capabilities. I kind of have a man crush on LeMay, so let's just take a few pictures of him. Isn't that beautiful? Look at him there in his Hawaiian shirt and his pistol and his cigar. What can you say about a guy like that? Yeah, he was the perfect head of SAC. He was totally willing to take the world to the brink of annihilation to fight the commies. Other people see this approach and they get a little nervous. The atomic scientists, it's an association, so there's this bulletin of atomic scientists. They create the doomsday clock, suggesting how close we were to the end of the world being midnight. And it was set at 2 minutes. As of this spring, it was set at 3 minutes. So you guys may not realize it, but at least according to scientists, the world is in a very dangerous place because of climate change, nuclear modernization. In other words, we have all these old weapons that we might want to modernize. That creates risks and increases the tension. And then also we have all these stockpiles of weapons. Okay, so anyway, great after effects of the Cold War. What else do we got? Doomsday clock over time. You can see here in 1991, it gets to its lowest point. We're 17 minutes from midnight. That's a huge Cold War scenario. But then by 2007, we're inching back up. And as I said, now we're almost to the point where we were in 1953. It's insane. Civil defense, we have campaigns to live through a nuclear attack. We have really, really funny public service announcements telling us how to live through an attack. Oh, by the way, I'll put a link up to Duck and Cover. You guys should watch it. It's pretty classic. The hydrogen bomb. We used to have, what were they? I can't even think of it. That's all right. Anyway, the hydrogen bomb becomes much more powerful. So our weapons are getting stronger and bigger. We're getting more complicated delivery systems, B-52 bombers, nuclear-powered submarines. We're trying to figure out how much of a threat they are to us. We overestimate that threat, and it gives the impression that the U.S. can't keep up with the Soviets. However, we are crushing them in all actuality. And look at this money that's being spent. Look at these warheads that are being created. And this is a lot of research and development, too, behind this. So don't forget that. From 1,000 to 12,000. So by 1959, mutually assured destruction is a real deal, right? It's a real thing. We also have this huge development in the 50s that totally transforms America. I mean, I can't stress it enough how much the interstate system transforms America. It's like you got the Transcontinental Railroad, then you got the interstate system, and now arguably you have the internet doing the same kinds of transformations. Let's go through it. It's the National Interstate and Defense Highway Act. So this is part of the Cold War. We spend a bunch of money, and over a period of 20 years, we build all these interstate systems. These are not interstate systems, but it's just kind of showing how little development there was and then how much we get by the end. As I've said, it's for defense, but there's also road construction, truckers, all that sort of stuff that comes along and supports the interstate system. A lot of support comes from urban areas, although eventually other people are going to see the benefits of it as well. Lots of money being spent. It's being spent by local people. This is an incredibly popular initiative, except for in the African American community and in other places where people lose property because of it. And where are you going to put a subway, or a subway, I'm sorry, where are you going to put a freeway? You're going to put a freeway where people can't really complain about it. They don't have political power to complain about it. So in Detroit, we lose residences, businesses, manufacturing plants, right? So this is insane. This cuts at the core and helps in some ways explain what's going on in Detroit. Why aren't there jobs? Because the freeways displace all these jobs. There's other reasons, but that's a really significant part of it. For people in, let's say, Nebraska, right? It's a beautiful thing. We love the interstate. Well, at first they complain a little bit because it also condemned the farm, but by then, by the time you get over that, you get much greater advantage. You get, oh, let's have some McDonald's. You get fast food franchises. You get Holiday Inns. You get credit cards. You get, whew, what's all this? Let's unpack this image for just a second. Magnificent possession for traveling moderns. And the car ain't bad either. Notice lots of women, right? Sort of objectified a little bit. Men doing the business, wearing that civilized hat. We got palm trees in the background. Goodness gracious, this is all about Southern California leisure lifestyle, isn't it? Modern Americans. All right. How does this impact civil rights? How does this impact other things? Well, let's talk about defense. We got a lot of people moving to jobs in the East Coast. We've got decreasing population here. Air conditioning, rise of the Sun Belt. In suburban nations, it's 98% Caucasian. The federal government is underwriting all kinds of these programs. It's benefiting white folk. Check this out. This is building 1 subdivision in Southern California. It's called Lakewood. You grade it, you trench it, you pour it, you frame it, and everybody moves in on the same damn day. These are defense workers. They're white. They think the same ways, generally speaking. And by the time we get to the 60s, a new conservative Republican movement is going to come out of Southern California. And it's really the Republican Party of today, but we'll talk about that later on. Levittown, New Jersey. There's another one of these out in Levittown. And the thing about Levittown is that you had to be white. And even though this covenant was outlawed by the Supreme Court, people still enforce it unofficially until the 1960s. So that's another part of the civil rights movement, is that there's widespread discrimination in housing. Even though the Supreme Court says it's illegal, just nothing has been done about it. Boy, what to say about this? We got more and more farmers. I'm sorry, fewer and fewer farmers with bigger and bigger farms. Feeding more and more people. That's profound. We're skipping all this because I want to get right to... How about this? This is one indicator of the changing realities in popular culture in America. Amos and Andy was originally a radio show. It was 2 white guys pretending to be black guys. This is what we call this minstrel tradition. When it goes on TV in 1953, it's an African-American show, right? Got African-American characters, but they're kind of stereotypical. I don't know. You can watch these shows on YouTube if you want. They're more complicated than some TV today even. But it didn't really matter what the content was because the NAACP didn't like it. They thought it was a stereotypical and negative, and the show is pulled in 1955, right? So we get this changing backdrop. We focus a lot on Rosa Parks and Brown v. Board, but there's other things going on. And when does the NAACP get big? During World War II. Brown v. Board comes out of the Warren Court, and Earl Warren is appointed by Eisenhower, but he proves to be very liberal, and we're going to talk more about the Warren Court, so I'm going to skip that for right now. Brown v. Board overturns Plessy v. Ferguson. It's a unanimous ruling, but all deliberate speed means do it quickly, slowly. It's a very ambiguous ruling. We got the Montgomery bus boycott. Rosa Parks is an NAACP member, right? And then finally, and this is really important, the boycott ends when the Supreme Court rules